Welcome to episode 1 in my teaching series of how to play the kantele. The kantele, which is a member of the Baltic psaltery family, is a really cool instrument to be playing music on because there's no real standardized method of playing. So what you'll find is that there's all kinds of people around the world making all kinds of different really amazing music on what would at first glance seem like a very simple instrument. So every player has something unique to bring to the table. I've arrived at my own technique mostly by busking here in Toronto on the subway system. And so my technique represents actually a lot of the acoustics of that space and the immediate reactions of commuters as they pass by. My techniques are also influenced by the fact that here in Toronto there's a lot of different folk musicians from different cultures bringing and sharing their music. So I'll often find myself playing music from France or Sweden or Lithuania, or music from the Baltic or klezmer traditions. So that's the kind of thing that I want to talk about in this teaching series, and so hopefully I can help you find your own voice on the instrument. I personally think that it's a good idea to mix your own influences with a healthy respect for the tradition, so I would recommend at the very least you familiarize yourself with various historical collections. Like for example, for the kantele, about 100 years ago, Vaisinen published his field collections of kantele pieces. And then as your own playing evolves, it's good to kind of understand how and why they're evolving away from the older traditions. My favorite players include Maija Pokela and Kaustinen, both of whom I learned from in Finland, as well as Maija Kauhanen, also in Finland, Laima Jansona in Latvia, and Akotas Danovičiūtė in Lithuania. So their stuff is well worth checking out. Here in North America, the kantele is less familiar with very few professional people. Vilnuis is probably the most famous. And so my goal here is to promote a higher level of kantele playing in North America. So in this lesson, I'm going to look at different fingerings and look at the advantages and disadvantages of each. I'm going to start with fingerings that generally keep your hands rooted on the kantele and generally dedicate one finger per string. In later episodes, we'll look at moving your hands around the instrument. So we'll start with what's more associated with 5-string technique. I don't have a 5-string kantele, but these would be the 5 notes that you would find on that instrument. The 5-string is, could be thousands of years old, and it's associated with the runo tradition in Finland, where a lot of the melodies that were collected associated with the runos are also the same melodies that were collected from kantele players. The most common fingering for the 5-string kantele is to place the right index finger on what would be the lowest note on a 5-string, and then the right thumb on what would then be the highest string, 5 strings up, and then the middle fingers of the left hand are just placed on the remaining strings like this, and then you can play a scale like this. And so the advantage of that fingering is that the right hand now has a strong rhythmic role, and your left hand now has more of a melodic role. So if you're going to be playing a lot of the dance music that is found in the kantele archives, you're probably going to end up playing strong beats with your right hand and then weaker beats with your left hand. So it would end up sounding something like this. The disadvantage of this fingering is that for wider melodies it kind of creates this awkwardness where you have part of the scale played with the left hand, part of the scale played with the right hand, and other parts of the scale played with maybe a mixture of both. So when I'm playing wider melodies, my brain kind of has a tough time working through that puzzle. So this brings us to the 10 or 11 string kantele, and this is an 11 string, and that's kind of the most popular in North America. So I'm not sure if this is the case, but I think what happened in general in North America, or my feeling, is that people learned 5-string melodies on 5-string kanteles, and then they moved up to 10 and 11 string kanteles, and they kept the 5-string fingerings and adapted it to the 10-string. And so you do this by either playing the lower notes with all of your right hand, or maybe your left hand in there as well, and then you play the top strings with your thumb. All of these fingerings can be found in the archival records, but the fingering that I prefer best is like this. So for the most part, the fingers alternate like this. And then on the instrument, the right middle finger goes on the tonic note, and then each other finger skips a string and goes to the next one up like this. So here's the notes going up, and then you use the ring finger down below the tonic like that. The left hand then is placed just the same as the right hand, but one finger up just to fill in all the gaps. And then so you have the scale like this. And then now I like to kind of break the pattern because my right pinky finger is much more in tune with my brain than my left, so I then break the pattern by dropping my right finger down, pinky finger down on the bottom note. And then one advantage of that is that you can then play the entire tonic chord with just your right hand like this. So there's two major advantages for this fingering system. One is that the consistency of the pattern of the alternating hands pattern means that there's a certain logic. When playing scales, you just kind of move back and forth. And the same with arpeggio type runs, that same sort of back and forth pattern happens. The second major advantage of using this fingering is that when you take your right hand off and then you drop your left pinky down onto the next string where it's going to naturally fall, is now when you strum with your right hand, again you get that tonic chord. So I'll get more into chords in the next lesson, but for now I'll just mention that if you're going to be switching a lot between strumming chords and plucking melodies, then this fingering is good for making that smooth transition. Okay, so there's three more quick things I want to talk about for fingering and plucking. I've moved to the 15 string now because I want to talk about playing melodies with a wider range, and then later on we'll talk about changing keys, but for now we'll just stick in the key of D. So before I mentioned that the right middle finger was on the tonic string, the D here, and so this is my normal playing position, but when I'm playing melodies where the range of the melody is some wider or different part of the scale, then I like to think of not just my middle finger as the tonic, but other fingers as well. And I usually use my ring finger as the tonic for a lot of things, and then more rarely my pinky finger. So let's move now up 2 strings, move our hands up 2 strings, so that our ring finger of our right hand is now on the tonic, and then we can play the scale. And the scale is actually from the right ring finger to the left thumb. So we'll play the scale like this. So let's move our whole hand up 2 strings again, and then we'll put our pinky down here on the tonic, the D again. And that's actually kind of a bit awkward for playing with your pinkies down here, but it's useful for melodies where the tonic is kind of this one up here with your left index finger, and then the melody kind of spans from the low 3 to the high 3 like this. Okay, so we haven't used our thumbs very much, so let's go back down to my normal position, and now we'll play the scale again. And when you get to the top of where your hands are, you just alternate your thumbs going on up as high as you can reach. So the thing that I wanted to talk about moving your thumbs up to the higher portion of the instrument, is that I don't generally dedicate each thumb to a specific string, but rather you just kind of have to sit and figure out where in the melody it makes sense for each thumb. So for example, you may want to use the right thumb to hit the high tonic up there, or you might have a passage where it makes more sense for your left thumb to hit the high tonic, just because you're alternating as the melody goes. So you kind of have to play a repertoire until you hit a piece where this becomes an actual issue for your speed, and then figure out which thumb makes sense for which note from there. In fact, you don't really have to dedicate each finger to one string. It just kind of helps to position yourself so you don't get lost. But often there's a good reason to play a string with a different finger. So for example, you can, if you want to play a repeated note quickly, then you can play it with two different fingers, like this. So here I'm playing this note with two different fingers at a time. Okay, so that's the lesson on fingering positions. So now I want to add one last note about the playing position. So I like to rest my forearms on the instrument like this. And in fact, that's why I build them with this wing extension, so that the sleeves don't get caught in the strings. You want your hands to then sit naturally so that you're not bending your wrists at awkward angles. Now, if you listen to Kaustinen, for example, you'll notice that she doesn't even rest her fingers on the strings. She lets each note ring out naturally. And that's kind of the beauty of the instrument. You get these internal harmonies when each string is in harmony with the note that was previously played before it. Or you can just, forego the beauty of it and just play it like a hard-hitting dance tune, like this. Anyway, I hope this gets you started in your Kantele journey, and I hope you join me next month when we talk more about how to construct chords. Meanwhile, I would really appreciate it if you could support my work and my lessons by supporting my Patreon, and you'll find the link for that in the description below. As you can probably imagine, this episode is filmed during the COVID-19 outbreak, and so I've generally lost all of my gigs, and a lot of that includes dance gigs where, my job as a musician is to bring people together and build community. So I would really appreciate it if you could join my community now, and hopefully one day we'll dance together.